Hi, Don. So good to see you. How are you?
I am well, thanks, Renee. Good to see you too. Good to see you too.
I'm so excited to do this. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me. We've had conversations before about philanthropy and your work and philanthropy in general. And I just wanted to extend that conversation and just start sharing it with others and talk about your work specifically and what you've been doing and how you've been moving in these streets.
Yes.
So, you're an activist, an author, a mentor, a gender equity activist, right? And a philanthropist. So I guess my first question to you is, how do you do it all, right? How do you make that happen? And in this one lifetime, right? Like you're doing so much, but how do you make it all happen? And how do you move? Yeah.
You know, it's funny when you say that, when you give me all those different identities. I often at times have heard from people that sounds like I'm all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a lot going on. And in my mind, I have nothing going on. Because all those things to me are wrapped up. You're right. I do a lot of different things and they sound like they're different things. I don't have a job. I don't go into an office every day. Nothing's the same every day. But what is the same every day is that I know in my lifetime, I have been blessed beyond my understanding and in this world. And so, and I know the gifts that I've been blessed with, and I know the privileges that I have, and my feeling on that is I have to spend the rest of my life giving that away, giving that back, and giving that. I shouldn't say giving it away because I share it, and it's so my everything I do is rooted in that.
Yeah.
And that to me that's what drives it. People always sometimes ask me, how'd you go from playing football to identifying as a feminist and doing all this? Like, to me, it was like this natural progression of realizing where my blessings have come from and what they are. And to me, they're the same thing. So I'm sure we'll get into more of that as we talk.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Because it is a living, breathing part of who I am and what I do.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that because we met when I was at the Miss Foundation for Women, and you were a board member, and
Yes.
you were one of two male board members.
Yes.
And I remember you because you exude all of that, right? You were always grateful, you were always authentic, and you were the first man that I heard identify as a feminist, right? And use that language specifically. And what really caught me about your energy was also the way that, board members, they'd come in like quarterly for meetings, and the staff, we kind of like walked around and said hello to everybody, and, they'll wave, but you always wanted to get to know us, right? You always spoke to us. It wasn't a kind of like, hi, staff member. It was like, hey, Renee. Right. Hi, Julia.
Those are my favorite days, right?
And you would come and you would speak to us. You took a couple of us to lunch. Like, it was just, so you always exuded that energy that I call and consider philanthropic energy, right? Because we know that philanthropy is the love of humanity. And I always got that vibe and that feeling from you. Right. Speaking of which, like I mentioned, philanthropy, love of humanity, that's how I kind of like define it. And I talk about it, thinking about it from not just like what we've come to know as philanthropy, these big institutions or large donations from individuals or family foundations that give for legacy, but also the folks doing work on the ground, right? The organizations doing real work, the teachers going that extra mile, or just being a teacher can be considered philanthropic, right? I would love to hear from you how you define philanthropy.
You kind of mentioned it in what you just said about how I was as a board member. A lot of times board members are busy people, right? We want them on the board because they bring certain skill sets to the organization. They bring finances to the organization. Clearly, that's the big thing. And the big thing with nonprofit boards is that you have to go fundraise. You have to go ask for money. And the philosophy around that ask has always been, for those of us who do that in the nonprofit space, has always been, I'm giving you the opportunity to help us. I'm giving you the opportunity to help these people or to save, the planet, right? Whatever the cause is. And that's always the way that you approach people who have resources, is by saying, I'm giving you the opportunity to do good. I've never been one to ask people for money from me. I just negotiated a deal this morning, and someone said, "Hey, we'll give you this." I said, "Okay, fine." Right? I was just happy to do the work. I'm just happy to go do the work. And so, and to me, the money didn't matter, and has never mattered. It's one of my faults as sometimes as a business person. But to me, it is. I think about how blessed I've been. And you talked about me coming into that office and getting to know y'all. You know why? It's because I was more of an activist on the board. Um, I want to do the work. I don't want to sit in a room and talk about how we get the work done or how we fundraise. I want to do the work. I want to do the work with the people who are doing it. And all my life as an athlete, I was around in this very hyper masculine, very narrow-minded mindset, not always in a negative way. But I found this whole other village of people who were caring and loving and giving and challenging the ways in which I was raised. And so the more time I could spend around people like you, the better I was becoming as a person. And so to me, it was like, I'm gonna walk past all these amazing people and go into some boardroom and sit and talk and walk. No, I'm soaking up all what they have, right? And I had to, and so to me, it was like a blessing for me to just be able to walk in and among y'all and be able and be accepted, because I came from a world that was so foreign to the Men's Foundation and to a lot of organizations that I've been blessed to be around. So for me, it is a constant state of sharing. It's a constant state of sharing of self. And if you're blessed like I have been to be able to do this and make a living doing this and be able to support my family and doing this, like I said, I've been blessed beyond my understanding.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I am blessed to know you. And I appreciate that. And like I said, that was the energy that you always brought into the space. And we would talk about you after board meetings. Like, did you talk to Don? Like, of course I talked to Don. Didn't talk to Don, talk to everybody. And he's like, isn't he great? Like, yes. So
but you know what's interesting? I have to share this because I several years ago did some work with the NCAA, and a friend of mine who was there, he was big into all the personality assessments. And one night I said that I'm an introvert. And everyone was like, "You're not an introvert. You come in with all this like energy and you're always speaking, you're on stage and all this." And then the guy, his name was Ron Stratton, he said, "At the end of the day, how do you feel?" I said, "I'm exhausted." And there were times when, and I would almost like hate myself at the end of the day because I felt like all I did was talk and scream, and it was like all this energy. And then I'd walk out of that office, I would get on an elevator, whatever. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I need to go like sit someplace quiet," and because I feel like I just expended. So I say that because sometimes when we talk about giving and sharing, we have to remember that we need to take time for ourselves in doing that, and it's a really important thing that I just wanted to share.
Oh no, that was important, and I appreciate that because we always have discussions about extroversion and introversion and all of that, and people say with personalities like yours that they can't possibly they're just out there, and it's about, and you actually taught me this, it's about where you get your energy from.
Right.
So as an introvert, you get your energy from yourself, and so that's why you have to replenish. And as an extrovert, you get it from others, and that's why you can go out and be. You actually taught me that, Don. So there you go.
Practice it.
Yes, I remember a lot. So in your book, you throw like a girl, the blind spot of masculinity, and also in your life's work and what you do, you talk a lot about aspirational masculinity. What is that? And please, please, please let me know how we get there.
This is a really timely and important part of my work, and I'll say our work because one of the things that we really need to do is reframe how we are talking to men. Yeah. And I was recently in a meeting and someone said, "Well, I don't use the term toxic masculinity." And I was in a meeting with someone recently said, "Hey, but we need to talk about that." I said, "That's the only masculinity we talk about. We don't talk about any other form of masculinity." And the way that I define how I got to the work around gender-based violence prevention is that I was asked by survivors, women, and some men like Jackson Katz, who's my mentor, to use my privilege and my status as a man to talk to men about dismantling that privilege and that status. And one thing that I say that what Jackson Katz pointed out to me was that he asked me to use a privilege I didn't know I had to talk about a problem I didn't know was mine. And
Mm.
so in untangling all of that about my privilege as a man to talk about masculinity, what we have been doing and what I felt like I knew I was doing very often in a classroom or in a locker room or wherever was that I was more accountable to the women who weren't in the room than to the men who were.
Wow.
And so I had to rethink, how are we talking to men? How are we giving men the space to live in their wholeness and live in their authenticity? And so the only reason that we're talking to men about masculinity and what it means to be a man is because Women and Survivors has implored us as men to do so. And so what we're doing is exactly what the women who want us to talk to men or want us to do, is to stop the violence, stop the bad behavior, stop the misogyny and the sexism. And so we need to move, and here's a really important point about this. We need to move beyond the chivalry of that sentiment. We need to relinquish men from the responsibility of talking about masculinity to protect women, because if you're talking about masculinity so that I can protect women, then don't mess with my violent masculinity, all right? I'm gonna need that to kick that guy's butt. I'm gonna need that to protect my woman, right? So we need to remove that to have a real honest conversation with and among men about what we want for each other. How do we help each other? How do we raise our sons to live in their whole authentic selves? And I mean in their loving, caring, passive, submissive, empathetic, vulnerable selves. How do we help men actualize our wholeness? Those aren't feminine qualities. Those are my wholeness as a human being. So how do we help men get to that? And that's the aspirational part, the aspirational masculinity. I want to talk to men about where I want to take men, not where I want to hold them back and say, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that because it hurts other people. Because here's the thing, and this is the last thing I'll say, sexism and misogyny hurts men first. It's what Bell Hooks says, right? It's the psychic self-mutilation that boys have to go through, right? If I don't remove my emotions from it, I'm gonna have a culture of men who are gonna do it for me. And they're gonna
Wow.
do it through sexism and misogyny and homophobia, right? And so we need to be able to relinquish men so that we can live in our full, authentic wholeness.
Oh my gosh. Okay. First of all, we have to have another conversation just about that. Like, I'm just like, what? Like,
Right, exactly.
like everything speaks so true to me. It rings so true, but it's like, I've never heard it in that way before. And it's just like, I mean, I've heard it from you, but like, it's just the idea that this needs to come out and be more in the world, because there's so many that still lean into like the term and the phrase in the conversations around toxic masculinity.
Right.
And so I would, yeah. First, well, I was going to ask you, what do you do? What are the talks that you do? Do you do any talks around this? But I guess we could just get into what are you doing now and what's happening, and you know what's your work look like right now?
You know, that's to your point about that conversation. When I published the book, I did a radio show, and I talked about being a whole man, being passive and submissive, and someone called in, and back then I used to say, aren't you submissive to your God? Aren't you a passive? Don't you know things greater than yourself? And then I taught my 16-year-old daughter how to drive. And passive and submissive and vulnerable took on a whole new meaning, right? So to be a better parent, to be a better partner, it meant I had to be passive and submissive and vulnerable. And we know these things, but we don't state them. And so a big part of my work, which is really interesting right now, is taking that model of talking about masculinity in these ways into the DEI space, which is now, you know, in the aftermath of Me Too, in the aftermath of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, the workplace has become sort of ground zero for the diversity, equity, inclusion conversation. And it's underscored sort of why the conversations with men have not changed in the quarter century that I've been doing this work. And ultimately it comes to men can opt out. We can opt out of the conversation. And so part of a couple of things, part of what my work is now is, one is recognizing that we have to do this work now and have these conversations in the workplace, where 5 years ago we didn't have to. 5 years ago, by the way, we weren't talking about the trans community. We weren't talking about the LGBTQ community in the way that we are now. So there's so many things that have happened very rapidly, and the workplace is struggling as a result. Also in the workplace, ultimately, white men are the ones who get to opt out. And white men are feeling attacked because all the DEI conversations, all the marginalized identities now have a voice. And white men are the last ones at the table. And there's still a hesitancy to extend grace to white men to allow them a space to talk with and amongst themselves.
Yeah.
And we want them to be allies to everyone else. They're not even allies to each other. And because if one of them says, hey, I really care, the rest of them, again, the bell hooks, you know, the culture is going to come down on that person.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I know this because I've watched this happen with groups of men generally. And no, I know this happens with white men. And especially now that now it's mandatory. So how do we get beyond that? And the way that we get beyond that is what my work has been for almost my entire life, is about how do we help the next generation get better? And so one of the questions I ask, if you're, and I'll stick with white men for a second, if you're a white man, you're struggling with this conversation around gender and race, and you're in a corporation, and you're trying to understand how to deal with the fact that your last boss was a black man and your new boss is a black woman, right? How do you deal with that as a white man and deal with that change? Or if you're a white male manager and you have to deal with this increasingly more diverse culture, because diversity now is just add all the marginalized identities to a company. That's not diversity. That's just bringing in more folks. It's not diversity until the culture changes and the more people feel comfortable in that environment. And so how do you get white men to engage in that? And I talk about excellence and advancement. The excellence is, we don't coach to not lose. We don't coach to win by a point. We coach excellence in the discipline. We do the same thing in the classroom. We don't teach to not fail, and we don't teach to pass by a point. We teach excellence in the discipline. So if we're going to talk about masculinity, it has to be excellence in masculinity. That's the aspirational part. So we have to teach excellence and advancement. And the advancement is, how do I help, if I'm a 30-year-old white man who's now working in a corporate space, and it's changed from when I started, 8 years ago out of college, how do I take that college guy who's 22 now and prepare him for today? And how do I do that? And how do I say to him, you know what? It wasn't like this when I came out of school, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like when you're 8 years into this profession. And so part of how we do that, and this is the work that I'm doing now, I call it Aspire. How do we help high school kids prepare for college or the workplace? How do we prepare college students for the workplace? And how do we talk to people in the workplace not as liabilities to the company? This is my point about the excellence, but recognize that the people who work in a corporation are parents, they're youth sport coaches, they're partners in relationships. How do we help them not just protect the company, but how do we help them be better parents, better members of their community, recognizing that the world is changing and we have to change with it? So that's the work I'm trying to create this platform where we're doing this in this, what I call the social ecosystem, that's enabling common language to be used in all those different areas of our lives.
Awesome. And then where do you focus? Are you focusing in sports still, and with corporations? Like who's your target audience, I guess?
So similar to what you said at the very top of this, I'm all over the place. I'm talking to people on the corporate side, I'm talking to people on the community side, but really where sort of the epicenter of this, in many ways, college campuses have always been that place where a lot of this kind of work gets done. I think we do, by the way, a horrible job of sexual assault prevention programming on college campuses. We ask young women to re-traumatize themselves, and we call that prevention. We do Take Back the Night. We do all these things in April, Sexual Assault Awareness Month, when that's the worst month to be doing that kind of programming on a college campus, right before students leave and the sun comes out if you're in the Northeast, right, or if you're in northern school. So we do so many things really, really poorly in higher education, and we think we're doing a good job of it. But where higher education sits in the middle of that ecosystem I just talked about is I say we in higher ed, as someone who works adjacent to higher ed, have the ability to tell high schools what the requirements are to be a college student. We've adjusted in our world to a tech-based economy. We've adjusted to a global economy, and we teach that. There are college professors would hate to have their email. Right? I have office hours on Tuesday from 3:45 to 4:17. If you're not there at the time, I'm not coming, and I don't answer email. Right? Every college student knows.
I remember those days.
Right? Remember those days? Right? And now we have, for example, at my alma mater, Syracuse, we have an IT school. We have an information technology school, because we live in a technology-based economy. And so we've adjusted for that. And we've adjusted for a global economy. the next economy is the diversity, equity, inclusion economy. Everyone saw what happened in Atlanta when between Delta Airlines and other things going on in Atlanta. Everyone's like, oh, this is because of Black Lives Matter. No, that's called market research. Those companies know that the world is a more diverse place and that customers are more diverse. There's a great ad by TIAA, it's a retirement ad, and it's a same-sex interracial couple. And they're sitting at their kitchen table doing the really much, one of them's reading the paper, the other one's talking about watering the ficus. They're retired, right? So here's this retired couple. That's the DEI economy. And so we have to teach people how to do that and be prepared for that, because that's what's coming.
Wow, that's really helpful. And so you spoke a little bit about at the top, just, being in a space because you were a high school athlete, and then you even did like, what do they call it when you're like 5 years old and playing football? What's that?
Like Little League, youth football.
Yes.
Yeah, Pop Warner, some people call it.
Yes.
Yes.
So you did all of that, then you were high school, and then college, and then the NFL. And so you were constantly surrounded by, masculine energy, and you had to prove that you were a man, I guess, in some circumstances. And I know you and I had conversations about how women reacted or acted in those spaces towards you, right? Because you were a football player. Can you speak a little bit to that, and then how you then transitioned into flying this flag for gender equity? What was your point where you're like, okay, this is what I need to do? This is crazy.
Yeah, I was always uncomfortable with the fame of being an athlete. I wasn't uncomfortable with fame, although I don't like it.
Okay.
But it's nice to be recognized when you walk into your deli, right? Or you walk into, and you get a little bit of a hookup, right? Hey, here goes Renee. I got your sandwich all ready for you because I knew you coming, right? Everyone loves that.
Everyone loves that.
Everyone loves that. But I was born in 1965. I remember the civil rights movement on television, right? When I say on television, I lived in New York. I grew up on Long Island. And I remember the newsreels from what was going on in the South as a kid. And I remember that energy, even though I wasn't cognizant of it at the time. And so I understood what it meant to be Black and then, in a very acute way, in a predominantly white world here in the Northeast and where I grew up. And all of a sudden, when I was able to play football and I was a commodity, I got treated differently. And it was not lost on me in any way. I talk about being at Syracuse, and as a quarterback, we would always go early from the team. So we'd be in a car and I would be sitting in the front seat because I was a starting quarterback. And there was a light right near the Carrier Dome where I played, a stadium that holds 50,000 people. But to the right, literally feet away, is the hood. And I always knew that if I got out of the car right there, I was just another nigger on the street. But I'm going to make a left, I'm going to go up the hill, and 50,000, arguably 50,000 white folks predominantly are going to cheer for me. That dichotomy was not lost on me.
Wow.
And so I always knew that I had to, I talk about being blessed. I always knew that I always had to check myself, and that recognizing that what people saw from the outside was not who I was. And when I was in high school, because I transferred to a predominantly white high school to play football, and overwhelmingly white high school, I started wearing a shirt and tie to class every day. So my last 2 years of high school, I wore a shirt and tie to school. And then when I got to college, every day I had a shirt and tie. Even if my shirt was dirty and my shoes had holes in them, I had a shirt and tie on. Because I always, and here's the thing, this is like what's crazy about it, is that up until I was 29 years old, after I retired from football, I thought that the identity that I was trying to portray as someone who had more going on in the world was because I was Black. I was responding to everything that, the ways in which I was raised. What I didn't realize, that part of what I was really masking was my masculinity. And I always say that my life was more adversely affected by my gender than by my race, because my race didn't hold me back. I had the opportunity to go to Syracuse University on a scholarship, free of charge. I came out with no debt. I had the opportunity to discover and to learn and to be famous and to have all of those privileges. The first chapter of my book is titled Black Man with Privilege, because while my being Black may have been a marginalized identity, my privileges as a man and as a football player was off the chart, right? And so when I recognized that my gender, my masculinity, kept me from loving, kept me from being honest, kept me from being transparent and vulnerable. All those things that were truly who I was. That's why I say my life was more adversely affected by that dogma than by being a black man in America. And we know what that's like.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Again, different topic. I'm just
Yes.
like, I can sit here and talk
Yes.
to you like forever. But you know, there's so many people who unfortunately, or not unfortunately, just haven't yet found kind of like how to move into whatever they're passionate about. Like you have been lucky, right?
Yes.
That you're able to say, wow, this is what I'm supposed to do. This using your privilege to support others, right? In a way that can actually be beneficial and can grow and benefit and help community. But what would you say, or is there anything you can share to someone who may not know what the cause is that they want to, you know, what they want to tackle, or how they are interested in something, but they don't know how to get started, right? Because you as a football player, like dumping your toes, right, or dumping your feet into gender equity and gender-based violence isn't something that people would have expected, right? So I'm sure there's other people out there who's like, oh, I'm really passionate about this cause, but I don't know how to get started. What would be your advice to them?
You know, as you were asking a question and as I was answering the last one, I was thinking about how fallible I am, and how I don't, you know, some people can say I've made mistakes in my life. I've made bad decisions in my life. They weren't mistakes; they were decisions that I made. And I'm saying that because I want to I want to be very clear that I'm not this like benevolent, perfect guy who has found, you know, my cause. Although I see it this way, and this is to answer that question. I think you have to find your authentic self and be really, really brave and courageous about doing so, because it may lead you to something that you never thought you were supposed to be about. It may lead you to something that you don't know anything about. And you may get to an age, that's why the chapter in my book is titled 29. I was 29 years old before I heard anyone talk about issues of masculinity and men's violence against women. I was 29. I'd lived in 2 different countries. I traveled around the world. I'd owned a home. I did all kinds of things in my life that people would think I was successful. I sat with a group of students last week and I listened to these young men, college men, talk among themselves. And I'm sitting in the room going, and it was at my alma mater. And I was sitting in the room and I'm like, man, 35 years ago, I was on this campus and I thought I had it figured out. And I didn't. I wasn't even close. I was sitting in that room, these guys were talking, I was crying because I'm still working on that. I'm still working on being my best self. And I say that because your question about, you know, what advice would you give to somebody is just be courageous about what's in your heart. If you think, wow, I would really love to do that, but take the butt out. And, right? I can say it different way, right? To get them out of here, right? Take the butt out. And the other thing to take out is you know, fear and apprehension, that's normal.
Yeah.
Take out money. Take out what you're gonna get. And you know, I'm in this really weird place. I'm 56 years old and going through divorce and kids, and my kids are going to college and there's money. Like I'm in that place where a lot of men have to have that moment, that come to Jesus moment where, who am I? How am I going to do this? How am I going to pay for all this? Right? It's really stressful and really painful. But if you stick to your authentic self and you have faith, I still, as much as I have all these pressures that are asking me to depart from who I am, I can't do it because it's the only thing I know how to do, is to be that. And so, and that's not because I'm stubborn, although I've been called that. It's because I've conditioned myself to live that way. That I don't know how to live in a way where I'm just pounding the dirt to make money to support something. I can't separate out my philanthropic side from anything I do, and so it's hard. And I think when you get to that point, you know, giving people advice, it's not going to be easy. Like, oh, one day I'm going to retire, or I'm going to go do something. You know, I always tell people, you know, retirement commercials are always somebody canoeing or something like, they're always doing something that they forgot to do while they were younger, right? Don't forget to do what's in your heart. and find that thing and be brave enough to go do it. Doesn't mean you have to quit your job, doesn't mean you have to, but pursue that thing that's in your heart that you go, well, and every time you go, well, take that out.
Yes, perfect, perfect. So staying in that vein, right? It's the year 2050, right? Maybe you're still hanging around. I don't know. But in the year 2050,
right.
What do you want people to know or remember about you and your philanthropy, or what do you want them to have built on?
You know, about 4 years ago, I was doing an interview. It was in Syracuse, where I'm there a lot, and I'm a favorite son because I did all this stuff up there. And I got asked that question about legacy. And certain things happen and you feel old, that make you feel old. Like when I got inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, I'm like, I'm too young for this, right? This is something that happens when you're, and that question about legacy or what I want, I'll honestly say, I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. I think that about a year ago, I got a phone call from a woman who said that she started the conversation by telling me she wasn't very nice to me 20 years ago. Right? And I said, okay, go on. And I felt bad because I didn't remember her being mean to me, right? So she said, but I was apprehensive because you were this football player who was coming in to do work around domestic violence, and there were very few men, and so I was apprehensive about you. I was skeptical, and I was really cold to you. And she says, but you've been doing this now for, at that time, probably 20 years. And she says, and I've really been following your career. And I think that's it. I always hated the term giving back as an athlete or anyone. To me, wasn't, you're not giving something back. Someone didn't give you something and said, hey, hold on to this until I need it, right? It is, if you live a life of service and you truly know what that means, it's not giving back. It is truly walking with humanity, that you have a role, you have a job to walk with humanity. And so to me, if anything, and I just made up that term, walking with humanity. So I'm going to go with that. If in the year 2050, if I'm still around, by the way.
And you sure you will be around in the year 2050?
I don't know about that, but if I am,
you definitely will.
it would be that he walked graciously with humanity, and I think that's. I think that would be. By the way, I just made that up right now because I want that in my eulogy.
Well, let me be the first to affirm that you walk graciously with humanity.
Thank you. And that's the blessing, right? That's the it's seamless with how I see the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so you've done so much and been working with so many different organizations, and then you're, with academia, and then you're with corporations, and then you're in the sports space. Is there any group or individual or organization that you would like people to pay attention to, or you think needs more attention that we can just share, that folks need to invest in or know about?
I can't single out any one. I've been on a few boards, and I keep, this is how my brain is. I've been on a few boards, and as you mentioned, being on the board of the Men's Foundation, I wasn't there because I had deep pockets. I was on the board of an organization called Stop It Now, which is a child sexual abuse organization. I wasn't there because I had deep pockets. I wasn't even there because I knew anything about child sexual abuse. I actually told them when they asked me to be on the board that I knew nothing about it, but I selfishly wanted to join the board so I can learn about it. And so I was on the board of Stop It Now. I was on the board of an organization called Family and Children's here on Long Island when I was working at Adelphi University. And I throw those three organizations out because I always think to myself, because I was on those boards because of my work, not necessarily because of my wallet. And I always think to myself, when I make it, right? I'm still talking about when I make it. I'm 56 years old. When I just said I haven't gotten there yet. When I make it, I'm going to make a big gift to all three of those organizations, because I didn't make big gifts when I was there. And it's still in my head that I want to be able to do that. And so I would say the organizations to pay attention to, and it goes back to what I said before about finding what you're passionate about, finding what's in your heart. There are so many really good people. We get really cynical nowadays about where we are around social justice and where we're all around social issues and education and if you believe in the spiritual world wants us to be cynical about all that. So we stop working hard. So we stop collaborating. We stop listening to each other. We stop listening to learn, right? Instead of listening to respond. There are so many still wonderful, amazing people out there who are trying every day to hold it together, to help those less fortunate, to help those who've been dealt a bad card, and who are just trying to do the right thing, whether it's for animals or the environment. There's so many wonderful people out there who are trying to do the right thing in our world. And I would say, if you know someone or know an organization, you go, wow, I really think those people are cool. Drop in, show them some support, show them some love, go to their website, put a little PayPal in their pocket, whatever it is. We all know, because it's funny, because like a lot of athletes would say, I want to do this, I want to get in philanthropy, and I want to help. I said, what do you want to help? Because I don't want you to help me today and not help me tomorrow. I want you to help me today and tomorrow. So the only way you can help me today and tomorrow is if you really, really care about what you're helping. And so find that thing. I don't care what it is. It's out there. It is out there. We are not born. We're born selfish and self-absorbed because we're babies, but we are not born without a heart and out caring and compassion and wanting to be connected to people. And find that thing, no matter what that thing is, and that organization. Trust me, that organization is out there. It's probably right next door to you, and you just don't know, because it's one of those places where you went, what are they doing over there?
Yeah, so true. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, philanthropy starts local, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, what's this big grand thing I can give to, and this and that, what? And it's like, just go across the street. Sometimes your local community center. And again, philanthropy, not just being about money, maybe you can volunteer.
Yes.
There's so many other things you can do. It's just right there. You don't have to go looking for it in some far out universe.
Correct.
Yes.
Like our billionaires who are going to a far out universe. Right?
Literally going to a far out universe. That's right.
Literally.
So what's next for you? What's next for Don McPherson?
Oh, I'm really trying to create this ecosystem that I call Aspire. And I really believe that we need to create common language in all parts of our world so that we can help parents have better conversations with their kids. I have some really crazy thoughts about where we need to be going with a lot of our conversations around sexual violence prevention and around masculinity, and I want to have fun with it. I've always been a kind of very serious, although maybe this interview might not show that side of it, but because you make me laugh and this is a fun conversation. And right, and so I want to really, I've got some really radical thoughts about it. A couple of years ago, I was about to talk to a group of students, and I just got so tired because of things I was going through in my personal life, and I got so tired of the fact that we want to talk to young people around about sexual violence, but we don't want to talk about sex. And it's one of those glaring, problem issues in our world that drive me crazy, like the Easter Bunny and Jesus and the resurrection. Yeah, where'd the bunny come from, right? Like, can we get to the truth of things? And I was talking to this group of students, and I said, I'm gonna tell y'all something that the adults in your world don't want you to know about sex. And you could hear a pin drop. It was 600, 800 students in the room. And I told them that sex is amazing. And I said it in a little different way.
Okay.
But I used those words. And what I wanted them to know was that, I said on a scale of 1 to 10, it's 50. Right? It's this amazing, wonderful, but the only way we talk about it with them is the 50 bad. If it's done without love and caring and compassion in an egalitarian way, right? Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. That kind of noise is not necessary.
It happens.
That we have to do this in a loving, caring way, and we have to move away from the ways in which we talk about social issues. That, in my opinion, don't move us to a positive conversation. And we have to enable people the courage to have those difficult conversations. And so that's always been my work, but I really want to move it into spaces that, like I was talking about white men in the workplace, into spaces where we have not penetrated in these conversations, to be able to have more honest conversations, more blunt conversations, because I think our times not only deserve it, they demand it. I think that young people, we were able to, as adults, hide things from them, tell them when they're older, they'll learn about these things, right? But now they have this thing. So all of our lives as adults fall on their face. And I do believe that this generation of young people are flat out rejecting so much of their parents' generation. And they're watching our inability to compromise. They're watching our inability to honestly communicate, to listen, to learn. They're watching the way our government is functioning or not functioning right now. They're seeing things like January 6th. They're seeing things like the entire Trump administration that was about hate and cruelty and anger and discord. And we need to move that back and start. So part of what is next for me is to continue to push an honest conversation, the hard conversations, in a way that is promoting love and caring and understanding. And it's also, as I said before, about teaching men about how do we live in our whole authentic selves.
Awesome. Oh, that was great. This is such a compelling conversation, and I can speak to you forever. but I want to pick up the pace a little bit and just kind of like wind us down at the same time, right? So if you would allow me, I'd like to ask you some quick fire questions. Just be aware, I'm going to know a lot more about Don McPherson by the end of this conversation, right? I'm going to be in your head.
Okay.
But
you might not want to go there, but okay.
So if you're down, we can get started. You
Absolutely.
Good?
Yes.
All right. So song you love and can listen to all the time.
Amazing Grace by Hubert Laws.
Oh, okay.
Check it
Favorite, I'm going to check it out. I don't know that. I don't know his rendition. Okay. Favorite sports team?
I don't have a sports team. I don't have one.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did not expect that answer.
I don't have a favorite sports team. There's no one that will make me lose sleep over sports.
Not even the Eagles?
Not even the Eagles. No, Eagles cut me. Why? I mean, they cut me too, right?
True. What did you want to be when you were a child?
Pediatrician.
You said a pediatrician or?
Pediatrician.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
From the time I was, and my mother was an RN, and she told me, I said, Mom, how much schooling would I have to do to be Dr. Kreskin? That was my pediatrician. I was like, 6 or 7 years old when I asked that question. And she says, well, and she calculated, you'll be about 32 when you would have your own practice like him. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna go to that much school.
You're like, no.
But for a minute, I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Oh my gosh. Okay. If you could eradicate one social ill or disease, what would it be?
The one I've been working on, misogyny and sexism.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Accomplishment you're most proud of?
Getting out of bed this morning. I take it day by day. I really do. That was my first thought. Like, my first thought was, gosh, I got out of bed this morning. Embrace this.
That's what these are supposed to be, your first thought. So perfect.
That's what it was.
Oh, finish this sentence.
Okay.
I can never have too much
time with my kids.
If you could be invisible for a day, what would you do?
Follow my kids around school. I might not like what I see, but that's what I would do.
That's what you would do.
That's
Maybe
where I would
you
go.
shouldn't do that because you might not like what you see.
I know, and I would be like, ooh. Or, you know what I know I would be? I'd be like, that's my girl. Go ahead, man.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Last three. First thing that comes to your mind when I say the following. Purpose.
Driven.
Joy.
Family.
Love.
Family.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Don. This has been a pleasure. I just love talking to you, and I'm going to talk to you more, but yes. I just appreciate your energy, your candor, your inspiration, your laughter, like all of it is so much fun. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share that we did not cover?
You know, probably not that I think we covered it because we covered it just by this discussion, by this dialogue. And I won't, as you can tell, I'm a storyteller, and I can do the
No, I
rapid
love it.
fire.
That's why you're here. I love it.
And I had a professor in college who was the first white man I ever saw talk about being the other. And he was a white man who talked about being in Africa. And I was so fascinated by that. And he was the only, and then I got to know him. And I wrote this paper for his class in 1985.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 1985, Professor Marcy. I keep this on my desk. And the title is Violence and Aggression, Same Punch, Different Pay. And it was about a prize fight in an arena and a gang fight in a park a couple of blocks away. How it was the same behavior, but in one place was big business with celebrities and politicians ringside and big money, and the other place was criminal behavior. And the criminals were actually fighting for something that meant something, right? Those gang members were really fighting for something that really, well, these other guys were just entertaining white culture, basically. And the reason why I keep it on my desk is because there was no academic program, there was no job, there was no place. As ironically, as the year after the Center for the Study of Sport and Society at Northeastern University was created, so there really wasn't a profession. And then when I retired from football, I went to work with Richard Lapchick at Northeastern at that center. And when I got there, long story short, turns out that Richard and my professor, who I wrote this paper for, spent time in Africa together. And when I tell that story, people go, wow, what a small world, right? That professor that treated you truly as a student, and this man that you went to work with when you retired in this space. Yeah. And I always say that it's a small world when you stick to what you're passionate about, because you will find the people who share that passion. And that's what this is. You and I met so many years ago, and for us to remain connected, it was because there was a passion for life and a passion for the work that we share. Yeah. So always in the back of the head, in the back of your head, you had, I gotta talk to Don. I gotta talk to Don.
Always.
Right? Don, I gotta talk, right? And the same thing. Like, okay, when I see your name, like, I gotta talk to Renee. We gotta have this conversation. We gotta go have another cup of coffee together. And so that's what makes it a small world. And when you have this, that's why when you talked about me coming through that office, it was like, let me connect with my kin, right? These are my people. And that's where you get your energy of life and your purpose. So I wanted to just share that because, you and I talking is like, I could see us when you said 2050, I could see us doing this again at 2050.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Okay, well, again, thank you so much. I think that was the perfect closing. Me being around in 2050.
Yes, exactly.
I plan on doing. Universe, hear me. I want to be here. So thank you so much, Don. And I look forward to having more conversations with you on all your different tentacles and all the work that you're doing and how we can bring it back together.
Likewise. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.